Now, we are live in the doghouse for episode 3. We're going to try to see if I could share the screen here in 1 second. And I'll introduce our guest. I think I figured it out. Okay, right here. Start messenger call. All right. Welcome, everybody. Our special guest tonight for In the Doghouse is none other than the generation sensation, Brian Hardy, who's not only a professional wrestler, promoter of USW, United States Wrestling, he's also an author, a singer, songwriter, a composer, a musician. He's done it all. Like he's literally the jack of all trades, man.
You just gave me the best introduction ever. Thanks, man. How are you tonight?
Welcome. This is a very special episode tonight. This is our 3rd episode of In the Doghouse. This is only our 2nd episode in the new room, new dining room area that I took over at my house. We're going to go right into our first question, Brian, because we know that you're a 2nd generation sensation. We know that your dad is Berryhardy. So let's talk about your upbringing in the business. How was that, having your dad on TV and everything?
It was a wild childhood, I'll tell you that much. When I was younger, like I tell people, my earliest memory was probably 2 years old, sitting on my grandfather's lap, eating a popsicle, watching the Ultimate Warrior run down the aisle on like WWF Superstars and stuff like that. As I got a little bit older, 3, 4, 5 years old, and I'm sitting on my mom's waterbed and I'm watching, things like it doesn't matter whether it's Superstars, whether it's Wrestling Challenge, whether it's Monday Night Raw, anything like that. I'm watching, my dad and, my uncle Dwayne, aka Gilbert, wrestle the Steiner brothers and all these different tag teams back in the day. And that was my earliest memories of pro wrestling. I was born in 1990, so I was a 90s kid. I grew up a 90s kid. As I became an adult, I started going back and studying everything I could get my hands on. And I love, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s wrestling. But I grew up as a 90s kid. I grew up in the Attitude Era and the Golden Era, as they say. I was a huge Bret Hart fan. I was a huge Hulkamaniac, in my younger years. And it was something that I exactly. Yeah,
I pretty much was knew a big fan too.
Dude, at such a young age, I pretty much knew this is what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I had so many friends that were like, I'm going to be a firefighter, or I'm going to be a lawyer or a doctor or this or that. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be on Monday Night Raw. And people were like, yeah, okay, kid, sure you are, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was my early memories of pro wrestling. As far as actually getting in and breaking into the business, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, that's my earliest memories.
Well, let's hear about it. Go ahead, let's hear about it. Let's hear about how you broke in.
So I was 18 years old. So I mean, much like anybody, which we kind of talked about off air, I was doing the backyard wrestling thing when I was a kid. I would constantly be out on the trampoline. I would have, me and my friends would go to the dollar store and buy cookie sheets and steel chairs from Walmart and all this other stuff. And we were just obsessed with, wrestling. And still to this day, all those guys that I used to hang out with in the neighborhood, they're like, you're the only one that ever went on to do something with it. All of us, we loved doing it, and because you did it, but you actually took it to a whole different level. And it was just one of those things where I was 17 years old, senior year was closing on me. And it was one of those things of oh, this is for real. I married my high school sweetheart. I checked myself out of 12th grade English class to get married. And I mean, we had already had a kid and another kid on the way. And I was like, I need to figure out how to make money to take care of these kids and put diapers on them and feed them and stuff like that and everything. I was like, I think I'm really going to give this pro wrestling thing a try. And straight out of high school, 2 weeks out of high school, I was right into a professional wrestling school in my area. a lot of what I preach, practice what you preach type thing. A lot of what I preach all the time is really bad because this wrestling school took an astronomical amount of money from me and pretty much just beat the living hell out of me. And it was like, I believe in paying dues and stuff like that, but this was not paying dues. This was like just literally getting the shit kicked out of you every day for no reason for months upon months upon months. And I wasn't learning anything. You know what I mean? And I was paying money and I was driving like 45 minutes a day to, go over to the school and stuff. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. And I remember like they were having us do like all these crazy drills that like I couldn't hang with at first. It's funny because I hear like Ric Flair's story and how many times he quit the business at first. That felt like what I did because like I couldn't hang with them in the beginning. I was, they were running 3-4 miles around a building. I'm passing out. Like they got a nurse like that's at the school, like literally at the wrestling school, like putting like ice packs down my pants and like all that kind of stuff, like trying to like get me to come too, just because I was like, I was not conditioned to do this. You know what I mean? Like I thought mentally I could do it, but like I was not physically conditioned to be a wrestler at the time. But they just kept kicking the shit out of me nonstop. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to do this. So I kind of went home and I was about to give up. And my grandmother was like my biggest supporter. And she's like, why don't you call your father? She's like, your father lives in Florida. Why don't you call your father and have him and a couple of his friends, like, come train you? She's like, because that's the only way, you're going to do it right. Like, like at the end of the day, like these other guys, like, I remember getting on the phone with my dad and the first thing my dad said to me, like, and as a child, it was a rough relationship. My dad was always on the road. So that's the thing. My dad wrestled for WWF from 87 to 95, WCW for 2 years, ECW for 6 months after that. So my dad was always on the road. And the thing was, him and my mom got divorced when I was very young. So I didn't really have like a great relationship with my father, only because my mother kept my father, out of the picture and away from the kids all the time and stuff like that. So me contacting him was like almost like contacting a stranger at the time. And I literally was like, hey, I'm really sorry, like just to call you out of the blue, but like I wanted to know like if you would be interested in training me. Like I'm at the school right now, I'm not being taught properly. Like, is there any way that you would be willing to like drive from Florida to Maryland and teach me the real way in the business? And at first, like I said, the first question that came out of my dad's mouth is, who was training you? And and then I tell him, and instantly right away you could just hear the sigh on the other end of the phone, and he's like, oh. And I'm like, what? And he's like, just another one of those guys that like is a Johnny come lately, like a Johnny nobody, like, this or that and whatever. And it's just taking people's money and ripping them off and not teaching them anything and not teaching them the right way. Because how can you teach what you don't know? You know what I mean? Like that's pretty much the thing. Like, how can you teach people something that you don't know? How can you teach people to be ready, like for TV, when you've never been TV yourself? You know what I mean? So at that point in time, that was a big thing. Like, so I bought a ring. I bought my first ring off of eBay from Kentucky. It cost me $3,000, and I had that thing put on an Estes truck and brought from Kentucky to Maryland. And like I said, it was weird because as a kid, I remember like when I was a little boy, like there was a wrestling ring in my basement. And my dad trained a lot of the guys like Gilbert and Axel Rotten and all these different dudes down in my basement when I was a baby. I don't remember too much about those days, but a lot of people around me always say, I can remember when you and your brother were little and yada, 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 and this and that and whatever, when there was a wrestling ring in the basement. So as I, turned 17, 18 years old, now I've got a full blown like Stu Hart set up in my basement of like dungeon style, like weights and wrestling mats and stuff like that. And then out in my backyard, I got a full blown, full size 16x16 ring, it got delivered from Kentucky on an Estes truck. And then now my dad, comes to stay, and it's my dad, and it's, all these different people stopping in to start teaching me how to wrestle. So, I mean, everybody had a little bit of a hand in my training. So it was like all the Maryland guys, Axel Rotten from ECW, Dwayne Gill, Uncle Dwayne Gilbert, from WWE, my dad, Playboy Bob Starr from WCW, and the list goes on and on and on and on of all these guys that like molded me and shaped me into who I was. And I was like, wow, this is actually how the business is supposed to be. Like, this is professional wrestling. Like, this is how you're supposed to act and conduct yourself and stuff like that. And it was night and day compared to these like fly by night guys who were like, yeah, we want you to play by our rules, and we want you to do this, and we want you to do that. And like I said, instantly. Like my dad's thing was like, who the fuck are these? I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this thing.
Yeah,
like,
you are. I got it set where
like,
yeah, you're good.
All right. I was like, he's like, who the
PG
fuck are these guys? Like nobody's ever heard of them. You know what I mean? And I'm like, exactly. So, and I get it, but that was my instant start into pro wrestling. I started out for the first year as a referee in 2008 with the No Name Wrestling Company that I never want to ever give any, knowledge to anybody about who they are. And then that, the year after that, that's when I actually started wrestling after. So I did some referee stuff. And then after that, I started wrestling. I made my pro debut in April of 2009, April the 4th, my wedding anniversary. So I was married for a year. My wedding anniversary is April 4th, 2008. My first pro wrestling match was April 4th, 2009, a year later. So I was almost in the doghouse, but luckily for me, I got a nice limousine and took my wife out to a really nice dinner and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm going on the road to wrestle. So we're pushing all of our stuff up for our anniversary a couple of days. So, and that was my introduction into pro wrestling. I drove 8 hours to Buffalo, New York with my dad. We checked out Niagara Falls for the first time in my life, which was a really cool like bonding moment for me and my father. And then we tag teamed with each other for Next Era Wrestling in Buffalo, New York. And the rest, as they say, is history. One of the first people I ever met in the pro wrestling business on my very first night in the locker room was Brody Lee. And RIP, I miss him. I love him. Wow. Such a good dude. But yeah, crazy.
That is awesome. I never knew you met Brody Lee. That's cool. That's awesome. Well, you met a lot of people over the years.
A lot of these, like I said, a lot of these folks very good friends with my family. So it's like
that is sad, awesome.
When he passed away.
That is awesome. You yeah. So the next question was gonna be, how was following in your dad's footsteps? Was it did it negative impact your career or positive impact in your career following in your dad's footsteps?
I got a little bit of both at times, honestly. There was times where, there was interviews that my dad used to conduct where he would say, like, I've been trying to talk my son out of being a pro wrestler. Like he really didn't want me in the business. And it was like one of those things, like, if you're going to be in the business, you're going to do things the right way and you're going to do things professional and you're going to do this and that and whatever. And it was kind of like, but I mean, he tried to tell me, like I said, to go do everything. I'm a very, as people know, you can go look up all my albums online and all that kind of stuff. I'm a touring musician. I've been a musician since the time I was 10 years old. The reason I picked up a guitar in the first place was because of the fact that I was told I couldn't get a pro wrestling license until I turned 18. So like me being a 10-year-old kid, like wanting to wrestle. Yeah, I still did my backyard wrestling and stuff like that at 10 years old, like anybody would do. But I was like, I want to be out in front of crowds, like making money and doing stuff. I recorded my first album when I was 10. And then after that, like it just stemmed from there. So I had a band called the Midfields. A lot of people, people see this interview, they'll watch it and go, oh my God, I got this album or I got that album. A lot of the Midfields albums are so hard to find. Like nobody has them anymore. And I get so surprised when people bring them to wrestling shows and music shows and they're like, hey, I got this Midfields album. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It's hard to find stuff on my band from all those years, but we actually did a number of albums. I think somewhere around like the ballpark of 11 records. And I pretty much tried to make all of them. Yeah, I tried to make all them disappear before I started doing my solo stuff. So then once I started releasing my solo albums, now I've got a couple solo EPs and I'm about to release my 5th full-length solo album. I want to say towards the beginning of August. The album's almost done now. But it was crazy. And back then, I was playing music, I was traveling, I was doing this and that. So when I started having to travel for pro wrestling, it was no different because I'd already been traveling as a musician. So like my wife would get in a car with me when she was pregnant and drive me hours away from here to like New Jersey or wherever it was at the time. And I'd get out and I'd play a concert at the Saint in Asbury Park, or I'd play here or there or whatever. And it was like the travel was nothing new to me. But the idea of like me wanting to live my dream as a pro wrestler, my father kept trying to just talk me out of it and say like, no, you're really good at music. Why don't you stick to music? Why don't you just do music? Like you're doing great with it. You're making money, you're traveling, you're making albums, like just stick to music. And then finally, when I said like, no, Dad, I'm going to do this, like I think at that point in time, he went, all right, he's being serious about it. So, it was, to answer your question, like it was a tough spot to be in because there was a lot of people that respected my father. And, like you have people in the business that sometimes are very educated. You have people in the business who aren't very educated at times. And you have people that are literally like, oh, who gives a piss? Like, his dad's a jobber, he's a jobber. Like he's a this and that. Like my dad was never against the word jobber. Rolling Stone and like all these different news places articles on my dad, like where it says like, jobber, berryhardy, this and that. Like it's kind of like a badge of honor. Like that's what they were there to do back in the day. They were there to do the job, but they made a lot of money doing that, and they traveled all the time, and they got to live off of another person's dime. Like they got to see the world off of another person's dime. So it was never looked at like a negative thing or a derogatory thing from my point of view. Like my dad wrestled all the other guys that were my heroes as a kid. Kerry Von Erich, Bret Hart, the British Bulldog Owen, Jim Neidhart, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker. My dad wrestled everybody. Like I said, with the exception of like Hogan, Savage, and Flair, my dad had wrestled a who's who list in the WWF, the WCW, and the ECW. Like, I think I sent you a photo. I think I sent you a photo of like my dad being pressed by the Ultimate Warrior. It made the front page of the Niagara Falls Gazette, like, and stuff like that. It was wild back in the day. And so for me, when I run into these people, there's people for years that I thought that I would never that would never know my dad. I actually told a buddy the other day, I said, there was only like one guy, I won't even mention his name on this podcast, but there was only one guy I ever ran into, and he was like a big megastar in the 80s. And he wrestled my dad. And I went to go like get his autograph or something one time. And I said like, oh, you wrestled my dad. And he was like, who's your dad? And I was like, I told him. And then he's like, oh, yeah, kid, I don't know. Too many drugs and too much alcohol and too much this and that. Like, I don't remember. And I was like, okay. And I left it alone. But anybody else, like, and if I mentioned the guy's name, I'm not mentioning the guy's name, but if I had mentioned the guy's name, everybody would go, oh, that makes sense. Like that totally makes sense.
Okay.
But anybody else in the business would literally, like there was guys that I never thought in a million years. Like I'm an 8-year-old kid and I'm watching, like, this is an example of it, is I'm watching Road Dogg and Billy Gunn versus Kane and Mankind at SummerSlam 98. It's supposed to be Kane and Mankind, but it was just Mankind. Like Billy Gunn and Road Dogg were my guys. Like that's who I dressed up as for Halloween one year and stuff like that and whatever else.
Awesome.
And I had no idea that like my dad had the Road Dogg's first match ever, his tryout match in WWF. I had no idea that my dad had Billy Gunn's first tryout match as a Smoking Guns in WWF and stuff like that. So like, just to put it in perspective, I had no clue that my father was who he was. Like even when I was like a diehard wrestling fan in the 90s, like I thought, oh, my dad was in the old school style of wrestling. Like he wouldn't know any of these other guys. And then you go on and you watch the Road Dogg's podcast on YouTube here, or you watch Billy Gunn's interviews and this and that and whatever. And these guys are like talking about my dad and putting him over about how such a good talent he was. And I'm like, that really like just like blew my brains, because I'm like, dude, this is crazy to me that like, I never thought, my dad would have ever, my dad didn't wrestle him as the New Age Outlaws, but my dad wrestled Billy Gunn when he was a Smoking Gun multiple times. And my dad had Brian Armstrong's first match with him in the WWF, which ended up becoming a golden gem on the WWE network years ago. So it's like, it's weird stuff, man. Like every day is something new that you just never imagined possible that happens. It's like, holy crap. So it's kind of cool.
It is awesome. That is really cool to hear all that, the backstories. Like I've watched some of your father's videos and stuff where he wrestled Kerry Von Erich and the British Bulldog. And like when I watched it the other day, I told you, I remember watching this stuff when I was a kid. Like I never knew like I would meet you and get to work with you and stuff like that. So it's really awesome. It's a real honor. It really is. We're going to move on to our third question. What is your most memorable moment of your career, of your wrestling?
Oh my gosh. See, a lot of people would probably say it's something like pertaining to WWE or something. It's not. My biggest memory in my career was probably 2012. I have a couple of little mini ones, but like the one that stands out to me, like for the rest of my life as like my greatest moment ever was, 2012, the night before the Royal Rumble, January the 28th, the Rumble was the 29th. that year, January the 28th, 2012, main event match for the MWF, Maryland Wrestling Federation, which is tattooed on my arm somewhere right there. Bam, Maryland Wrestling Federation heavyweight championship. It was myself versus Jerry the King Lawler. And that match went 35 minutes with the King. And if you can hang with the King, then you can hang with anybody. And that's the thing. And at that point, I had thought in my mind, because you get these ideas in your head that you're good. And back then I was not good. I tell people, like, looking back now, 17 years in, my first 3 years in the business, I was not good. And I thought I was awesome and amazing and this and that. And other people would put me over, and everybody wants to hear how good you are and this and that and whatever. But like, nobody actually wants to take the time to get good. I was not good until I stepped foot in a ring with Jerry Lawler. And then once I wrestled Jerry Lawler, a light bulb went off. I don't know what it was, but something registered. I had an amazing match with him that night. And then after that, it was like it was like the floodgates open and a world of knowledge had just taken me over. And it was like, at that point in time, I was like, yeah, I'm meant to be in this business. I couldn't have told you that before then. I couldn't have told you the first 3 years of my career that I was meant to be in this business. I was questioning myself every day. I was like, I don't know if I belong. I don't know if I this, I don't know if I that. Now, after that Jerry Lawler match, that opened up so many doors. I always tell everybody, I think the reason that I ever got a shot in WWE was because of my Jerry Lawler match. And I'm like, because I think Lawler went back to TV and started talking to me about all those guys. And everybody, the very first time I ever went to WWE, everybody knew about that match.
That's awesome, man. The King is a great wrestler. I've watched so much footage of him and so many matches of his. Andy Kaufman and him was a big thing for me. Like, I had that on VHS when I was a kid. I rewatched it so much I wore out the tape.
There was actually a spot in that match where he picked me up and gave me a backdrop, and he grabs my arm. Like, I wish I have it on DVD. I wish I can find a way to get it. I'm not very like tech savvy. I wish I could find a way to get that match pulled from DVD and put onto YouTube.
You can do that
because like
you can do that.
I know I can. I don't know how. I'm not that technologically advanced with all that kind of stuff. So, but there's a spot in the match where Jerry Lawler literally takes my arm and he puts it around him, and he's getting ready to lift me for the backdrop, and he goes, "He reminds me of Andy Kaufman," and stuff like that. So it's a great match. I'm actually one of the only people, to my knowledge, back then. I'm sure since then it's probably happened a ton or whatever. People see stuff, they get all jelly, and then stuff starts happening. But back in 2012, this wasn't a thing. I was one of the only independent guys that I knew. And this was Jerry, not me. Jerry had enough respect for me in that match. He called it. Everything was called on the fly in the ring. We didn't speak about anything backstage. And in the ring, he hits me with the pile driver. And as soon as he hits me with the pile driver, he says, "Kick out on 2." And I literally was like, holy crap. So I was one of the youngest guys at the time. I think I was 20, 21 years old at the time. And I got to kick out of the pile driver.
Wow. No way.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Pretty amazing.
Well, that would be
that was just a total
memorable moment. Who won the match, may I ask?
Me via DQ. One of the other big heels in the company who was feuding with me at the time comes out and starts beating me up. So, of course, then I win via DQ. Jerry looks good. I look good. But at the very end, Jerry, who was a complete heel, he cut like an ECW style promo on the crowd in Baltimore and said the Ravens sucked and all this other stuff and everything like that. Told everybody that the hall that we were wrestling in reminded him of the crappy bingo hall in Philadelphia and all this other stuff and everything. And it got to the point where at the very end of the match, like he was a heel for 35 minutes. And I mean, everybody was Hardy going crazy. And then at the very end of the match, I get jumped, bell rings, I win via DQ. I keep the Maryland title. And then all of a sudden, Jerry helps me, and we are both ping-ponging the biggest heel in the company back and forth, both trading punches on him. And then I give him the super kick, and he spins around into Jerry, and Jerry gives him the pile driver. And then at the very end, Jerry and I are standing there. There's like a ton of photos on like Google and a bunch of other wrestling websites where like I'm sticking out my hand, and I'm trying to shake Jerry's hand. And like he looks at me for a few minutes, and I turned around and I looked at him, and I said, like, you don't understand like what this just meant to me. Like, you know, there's a big segment. If you ever get the time, weak plug, check out the Brian Hardy story. Talks all about that match and a ton of other stuff in this book. But there was like some really nice words said between me and
That's
Jerry.
available on Amazon, right?
Amazon.com for $30. Wrestling with Life, Rocking All Night, the Brian Hardy story. So you can't beat it. A lot of people have purchased it. I'm eternally grateful for everything. I swore I was always going to write a book. This pretty much covers the first 34 years of my life. I turn 34 next week, so I'm very excited.
Wow. I'm excited for you. That book's a kind of a big deal. Have something like that on Amazon. Nobody else around here is doing stuff like that. That's impressive.
It's wild. There's a little excerpt on here. So there's 3 different excerpts on the back. There's an excerpt from Danny Mays, who was the ring announcer for MWF and USW. He currently is the ring announcer for MCW in Maryland. And he's in a band. He's a bass player in a band called Here's to the Night. He puts a little excerpt in here on the back. Bob Starr from WWF and WCW puts a little something on the back here. But the coolest thing I'll read to you real fast. It's really micro. It's from my wife. And it says, this is the story of a guy who at the end of the day has achieved every dream he has ever dreamt. A man who, despite his not so normal upbringing, has become an awesome father and husband. Despite the statistics life has thrown at him, he manages to maintain a normal family life with a not so normal professional one. Kayla Hardy is absolutely the truth. I sit in these 4 walls a lot because around this area in the state of Maryland, I mean, you could take me other places. You could take me to Hollywood, California and stuff like that. And I've always got people that are like, hey, I know you from WWE. I saw you wrestle so-and-so on WWE and stuff. And that's cool. And I'm sure we'll get there in this interview. And then also if I travel to other states, it's the same thing. We'll stop in places. People ask me for pictures. I usually see the hair. It's a dead giveaway. And then it turns into a conversation and yada, 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 this and that. But here in Maryland, it's like I've built a guy here. So I can't go out to dinner with my family without someone, hey, can I get a picture, an autograph or this or that? And my wife said, this was the profession you chose. You're going to sign every autograph and you're going to take every picture possible and you're going to smile and you're going to do whatever they ask you to do because they're the fans. And without the fans and without buying the books and the t-shirts and the action figures and the CDs and the this and that, I wouldn't have the life that I have. So I'm eternally grateful for the fans. But sometimes, if I'm eating dinner and you're sitting over at the next table, taking not selfies, but you're taking photos of me, while I'm stuffing my face, it's not too flattering. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that isn't a flattering moment for me. So I can just imagine, you know what I mean? I'm a sloppy eater. I'm a big kid.
Same. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I still use a napkin, but I'm like, damn, dude, I see them over there doing that. And
wait a second.
I've been asked for an autograph in a urinal. I've been asked for an autograph at a funeral, all that kind of stuff. It's a weird concept. So I'm like, yeah, it's an interesting life. But my wife always says, he's maintaining a really awesome normal family life while, living not so normal professional one. So it's yeah.
I love it. That sounds perfect. That does. That perfectly describes what we know as you. You're a roller coaster ride. You got everything going for you, man. It's awesome. We're going to move on to question 4. You already kind of answered this, but we're going to go on anyways. And out of all the legends you've been in the ring with, who was your favorite and why? And you kind of already said the Jerry Lawler thing, right? Or am I wrong?
So I'll change it up on you just a tad bit. So I love my match with Lawler. Like I said, that's probably my favorite match of all time and stuff like that in the business and everything. And I'm a huge Jerry Lawler fan. I was a huge Memphis fan, all that kind of stuff. But there's 2 other matches that I would probably put up there. And once again, people are going to go, oh, is it so-and-so on WWE? No, it's not any WWE matches. And they're like, what? Are you serious? And I'm like, yeah, go back and educate yourself on my other shit, and then it'll make sense to you. I had the opportunity and the pleasure of 2 moments in my career, which were really cool. As a kid, I grew up an LJN kid and a Hasbro kid. And I am a diehard, as you can tell from behind here, I'm a diehard wrestling figure collector, and I've always been. My dad sent me a text message yesterday and said, you are the man at action figure shit. When it comes to action figure shit, you know your stuff. And I'm like, Yeah, and I've always been that way. Like, I mean, before there was, no offense to them, before there was ever a, major wrestling figure podcast or a this or a that or whatever to educate people, I was answering a lot of these questions long before, there was ever YouTube shows that teach people about action figures and what was rare and what was this and what was that. I was always a die-hard figure kid. Like, I could tell you like what certain figures, like if you went to a flea market and bought like a piece of shit figure, off of whatever, I could literally tell you, oh, that's from SummerSlam 99, or this is a fully loaded 2000 package, or this is a Titantron, yada, 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 from this series. I can describe to you what the packaging looks like. The figure might not even be in the package, but I'm ridiculous with it. Like, people are like, Brian, your memory. So I'm like, yeah, I couldn't tell you what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can tell you what the hell happened 25 years ago, like that, whatever. But I was an LJN kid and I was a Hasbro kid. I inherited all my brothers. I have a brother who's 6 years older than me, has nothing to do with wrestling. And he, like, as a kid, had every single LJN figure known to man. I inherited all those. I was a kid who grew up, like I said, I was born in 90. So by 92, 93, I'm 3 years old and I'm playing with Hasbro figures. And two of the Hasbro figures that I was always playing with was Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Hexall Jim Duggan. And wow, what a weird freaking life it has been when in 2012, in December of 2012, I'm wrestling Brutus the Barber Beefcake, which is probably my second most favorite match that I've ever had. He didn't cut my hair because I didn't have any hair back then. He got pissed about that though too. Like, nice guy, and he was really good to me, but he got mad because I literally had no hair, and he was like, "What if I look like I'm like chopping your ears off or something like that?" Or I'm like, "Do whatever you want, just put me in the sleeper hold, like, this is cool." But yeah, Brutus was an awesome match. Good guy. I liked my match with him, and in October of 2012, 2 months before that, 2012 was a crazy year for me. But in October of 2012, in Lockport, New York, right down the street from Niagara Falls, myself and my father main evented the Keenan Arena against Johnny Inferno, which was like the local guys in the New York area there. It was pretty popular. And his tag team partner, Hexall Jim Duggan.
Oh, wow.
So that was a crazy match. I loved it. And it was cool, like being a kid and watching my dad wrestle Hexall in singles match, but then like also watching my dad and my Uncle Dwayne wrestle Hexall when he was tag teaming with Sergeant Slaughter and stuff like that as a kid was wild. And then now, all these years later, same action figure that I'm playing with in my living room, now I'm wrestling the real guy. He's standing across from me, and me and him are about to lock up, and I'm just like, this is wild. Like, this is such a wild life. And nobody, like I said, I meet people that I knew from elementary school and high school, and a lot of times they just don't believe me. You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell them, oh, like, you remember when we used to play with action figures in my grandparents' living room? Well, I got to wrestle that guy like all these years. Like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. But it goes deeper than that, man. Like, there's so many. It's like I said, telephone, telegram, telewrestler. This business is filled with such bullshit all the time, and I love it. I don't know why I'm a glutton for punishment, but there's like guys that literally I go over to them and I say, like, you have people's friends all the time who are literally like, their dad's buddies or whatever. You're at a cookout and they're like, oh, I remember back in the day, wrestling was wrestling. Bobo Brazil and Bruno Sammartino and superstar Billy Graham. And I'm like, oh yeah, I love all of them. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I start like talking about matches with them. And then I go, yeah, I was like, what's crazy is like that same era, like the tag team champs was the Valiant brothers. I'm like, and I wrestled Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man. And they're like, no, you didn't. Like, I was watching him in Madison Square Garden like 30 years before you were even born. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And when I wrestled him, I was 21 and he was 71. And they're like, what? Are you kidding me? And then I show them pictures and they're like, this is crazy. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's a wild freaking business, man. It's the Wild West, as they say.
Most definitely. Most definitely. All right. We're going to move on to question number 5. What advice do you have for the future generations in this wrestling business? What advice do you have?
Man, it's crazy because I used to, when I was younger, I was a whippersnapper. Nobody could tell me anything. Like I said, first couple of years in the business, Now, there's a lot of older vets that'll tell you, Brian says all that. And like, Brian was such a quiet, cool, collected kid and this and that. And I don't think so back then. I think that back then I was hell on wheels and I just didn't give a shit what anyone said. Like the first 3 years in the business, I thought I knew it all because like I watched it on TV when I was a kid. So I knew everything. And then it got to the point where, like I said, once I really started having like big years and then I really started getting challenged with opponents before I knew what I was wrestling, guys like Robbie E and Eric Young and Sanjay Dutt and this and that, Eddie Edwards, all these different guys, and shit was really starting to take off for me. And I was like, okay, it's rather time to put up or shut up. Like, it's time to learn this business for real and be one of the boys. Otherwise they're going to expose me real fast for like who I'm not. And it put me into a spot where now, all these years later, 17 years later, I'm in the situation where I am the veteran, so to speak. So I still am the guy that will pull up a chair. And I recommend this to every younger guy. I'm 33 and I still do it. I pull up a chair next to anybody who has done bigger things than me in the wrestling business. And I literally sit there like a sponge and absorb everything they say to me. And it's like, I'm not talking about guys that like might be a hot commodity here or there or whatever. I'm talking about guys that, you know, without a shadow of a doubt, have that education behind them. And I sit there and I just absorb everything that they say. And I just take it in like a sponge. And I'm like, and that's why I know so much about the pro wrestling business, but I'm still learning on the daily too. The day that you stop learning is the day that you stop wrestling. But at the same time, it's also one of those things where, like, being in that veteran status now, all these years later, 17 years in, a lot of times now, the stuff that I would never say to people before, I'm like brutally honest. And I always say, like, my wife and kids, they go, God, you're rude. You're rude. Like, because what you do is you start off with like, I'm not trying to be a dick, but, and then usually you follow up with something being a dick. And I'm like, yeah, but like, that's it's comical when I say it, but it's honest. Like, it's never from a bad, malicious spot in my heart. It's never like, you're the drizzling shits and you need to this and that and whatever. Pretty much like, hey, I watched your match and I think you could do this, this, and this better. And then they go back and they do it the next time and they're like, holy crap, you were right. Like, you knew what you were talking about. And I'm like, yeah, like, you don't, you know, like, I think what people don't realize is, like, not all over the years, but like, I did get to have time between 2012 and 2019 up at WWE. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second. But like, we, you know, I got to have an education like most people wouldn't understand. I got to have tryouts with TNA. I got to have tryouts with Ring of Honor. When you are sitting in a room with a guy like Jim Cornette and you're getting taught how to do promos for 30, 40 minutes at a time, and he's just spending one-on-one time with you, that's very educational. Like, it is very, very, very awesome. So I had all that. I had all that one-on-one time. And a lot of people, like I said, sometimes people wouldn't give me the time of day just because I never was going out of my way to mention stuff. And then other times people would already know, like when I would walk up in somewhere, it's Barry Hardy's kid. Like, you better, you know, go pull him aside, dude. He's a diamond in the rough. You better go fucking, you know, do something good with him, because like, he'll listen to you, he'll learn, he'll this, he'll that, and then he'll pass that knowledge on down the line. And it's true. But my biggest thing, besides pulling up a chair and absorbing and being a sponge for the younger guys, would definitely be 2 eyes. Sorry. Geez. I just went 2 ears. 2 eyes, 2 ears, mouth shut. So keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut and listen. And that's the only way you're going to learn. A lot of guys nowadays always want to fight. A lot of the dudes that wrestle matches with me, they laugh. Like, I was talking to like 2 or 3 different guys last night that they love it. They're like, Brian is so funny. Like, he goes out into the ring and like, if, like I said, if it was like a veteran, like that, you know, knew a lot more than me, guys that I looked up to as a kid and shit like that, I would be all ears. Whatever you would like to do tonight, sir. Like, there's an etiquette in the wrestling business that I got to follow. But if I'm that guy in the ring with somebody else, it's like, keep your eyes and ears open, your mouth shut. Listen to me. You are going to learn something, and we are going to work tonight. And guess what? We don't have to call a bazillion spots in the back, because you're not going to remember half that shit anyway in the back. You're going to be too nervous about going out in front of the fans and working and doing this and that. But You get in the ring with me, you don't know what's going to happen in the match. We lock up, and then I start telling you stuff and do this and do that and blah, 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 blah. And by that point in time, literally people are like, dude, that was like the easiest match of my life. Like, Brian just made my night really easy. And I take a lot of pride in that. That is where the art of professional wrestling comes into play.
Okay. I like that. That's good answers. Very good answers. Okay, well, we'll just go on to our next question. And in your opinion, what is the best way to move up in the business?
The best what? I'm sorry, it kind of cut out.
Best way to move up in the business, to get up in the card and to get, to the big leagues like WWE.
It's different today than it was back then. Hell, even when I came in, like, it was a different business with my father than it was with me, and it's a different business now than it is with my kids. And my kids are all coming into the business now. And God, that makes me feel so old. Yeah. But I would honestly say the biggest thing is, I don't know. For me, like I said, times have changed, and I understand that. And sometimes if you don't change with the times, they will pass you by. I hear that a lot of times and stuff like that. But for me, when I broke into the business, I was carrying guys' bags. So I come from that generation of I'm walking into a building holding Terry Funk's bag and holding his chew cup. Here, Brian, hold my chew cup for me, boy. And I'm looking like, oh, a skull, like a bunch of skulls spit into a cup that he wants me to hold and stuff like that and everything. Carrying bags for guys like Justin Credible and Gilbert and Valdez and Carlito and all these different guys that I got to like pick their minds, and they all taught me a little something in my career. Everywhere I went, man, I was a lackey for a long time for Axel Rotten. I was a lackey for Raven. So many different guys. So it's weird because I would always say to people, don't be scared to grab a bag. Don't be scared to grab a bag. Don't be scared to carry somebody's bag in the building for them. A lot of guys think, like I said, that they are good, and half the time they're not. They think they're good. They think they're above it. I don't need to set up or tear down the ring. I don't need to carry bags. I don't need to this. I don't need to that. The old school version of paying your dues to a lot of people has died. And it just depends on who brings you into the business and how they bring you into the business. But I'm like, that's the kind of thing. Like, I had no problem back in the day with going and getting people coffee. You know what I mean? Like, if I was in a big, arena style thing and I'm the young kid on the card, if, whoever the hell, Hexall Jim Duggan or this guy or that guy wants me to go get him coffee, I'm going to go get him coffee. It's as simple as that. And you kind of like earn that respect. And then when you realize like that you're willing to do stuff like that, and you see that, you're willing to take the time to do that for them, then they kind of like, you start earning their respect a little by little. And then they're willing to teach you some of the secrets of the trade, the trick of the trade, the business, the ins and outs of how to do things in the business. I learned psychology. I tell people all the time, like, I couldn't learn psychology for the life of me in a ring. I just couldn't. I mean, now I'm like freaking way like everyone, like I said, everybody else puts me over for this kind of stuff. I'm just like, whatever, guys. I love the business. Like, it's as simple as that. But the psychology of the business, I could do an easy breakdown of psychology in like 5 seconds. And then people would be like, oh, like, I'm not going to do it here on this podcast because that's why people pay to go to wrestling school and that kind of stuff and whatever else.
Yeah.
Like, I could do an easy breakdown of psychology for you. Boom, like that. I used to not be able to do that. But I learned psychology of the business by sitting in the back of a vehicle with my mouth shut, listening to people like my dad and Gilbert driving and talking, or listening to like whatever Axel Rotten and this person, that person, Shane Douglas, whatever, Terry Funk. Like, I just shut my mouth and just sat in that back seat and just, once again, 2 eyes, 2 ears, listened, kept my mouth shut, and just literally listened to everything they had to say and absorbed it like a sponge. And I was like, light bulb went off, like, holy crap, now I'm understanding like why you do this, where to put this, why to give the fans this, and why to take it away here, and why to this and that. And at that point, bam, I was like, Brian, you're on it, you're on to something. Like, this is cool. Because for years I just didn't get it. Like, I didn't understand it for like the first 3 years. And I was like, there are guys that are 15, 16, 18, 22 years in, and they wrestle one time every 5 or 6 or 7 months, and they literally, you know, like they have trouble getting bookings. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. People are like fireworks off. They literally they get a rare booking every once in a while, and they're not working all the time. And practice does make perfect. And even if you're not wrestling in front of a crowd, you constantly have to be training. And that doesn't mean, you know, like my family gets upset. I have random weights laying all over the place in this house, like where I'll be sitting in the living room lifting dumbbells and stuff like that at random times, and people are like, "Oh my gosh!" And I don't look like Cena, you know what I mean? Like I don't have, you know, you look at me and you think, "Damn, for as much as this guy works out, like he doesn't have like, you know, the best bodybuilding body or anything like that." But I stay as much in shape as I can. But I always tell people I got that 80s wrestler body. I love it. I love that Greg the Hammer Valentine style like body or whatever.
Nothing wrong with that. Greg Valentine was talented. Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. So I'm cool with that old school, you know, body look from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm cool with it. I don't mind it. I don't need that 6-pack abs and all that other kind of stuff. But when we get going in the ring, hang on to your seat, because my thing is I'm going to run circles around you if you can't hang. So,
that is awesome. That is awesome. And who needs the cookie cutter style body anyways? Because that cut up stuff is a dime a dozen. We need more guys that look different and different styles and shapes and sizes. You know,
big time. I think that's what wrestling is lacking in today's generation, is everybody, you know, straight out of a gym, everybody's straight out of, you know, college ball or this or that, or a Hollywood stuntman actor or something like that. Like nobody is just the guy that they find anymore that passionately loves pro wrestling. I think that's what I wanted to change about the industry. And I didn't look, when I, you know, started my wrestling company, I didn't look at my wrestling company. I've been promoting shows now for minus 2 years off of my end. So 15 years now I've been promoting pro wrestling shows, and off and on. And I never, you know, looked at my wrestling company as something like just another indie. I hear a lot of guys say that, just another indie. I was like, nah, man, especially now. Like I always knew there was a plan in motion to do big stuff. But when I look at guys, I'm not looking for the cookie cutter bodies and the, you know, 6-pack abs and the this and that and whatever else. I'm just looking like, do you love the business? Do you, you know, like I tell people all the time, I could teach you the moves. I could teach you this. I could teach you that. I can't teach you heart. If you don't have heart, then I don't want you in the business, because like, I mean, you not believe how many people I meet, and it breaks my heart because I'm a lifelong wrestling fan my entire life. Like that's why I got into the business. I talk to people and they say, I'm like, you know, do you watch wrestling? And they're like, nah, not really. And I'm like, I understand today's wrestling isn't like what, you know, yesteryear's wrestling is, but we have Peacock, we have YouTube. You can be studying anything from any wrestling promotion in the world, and your answer is, I don't really watch wrestling.
Well,
get out.
You watch wrestling if you're getting into the business.
Yeah,
that makes
you would think,
sense.
but I mean,
it makes no sense.
I hear a lot of answers. I hear a lot of answers from guys that are on shows nowadays, and it's literally like, nah, bro, I don't watch wrestling. And I'm like, well, like if you just said you didn't watch the modern day product, I'd be like, okay, but you're saying you don't watch wrestling at all. Like you're saying you won't go back and watch ECW from 97 or 99, like in the golden years of ECW. You won't watch any WWF stuff. You won't watch any WCW stuff. You won't watch any TNA when it was only $9.99 on pay-per-view back in the day, like in 2002 at the Tennessee Fairgrounds or whatever, like the good stuff. You don't want to watch any of that? No, I don't really watch wrestling. I just thought it would be something fun to do in my downtime. So I started training. I'm like, get out of my business. Get out of my wrestling business right now.
I agree, man. Like that's terrible. That is terrible. Why would you even get into business if you don't love it? Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
No sense.
It's an easy way. Like there's a Tough Enough segment where Triple H, says to Maven, I think it was back then, he's like, why'd you get into business? And he starts saying this and that and whatever. And Triple H got tired of hearing like the funny answers. He's like, oh, so basically, fame, fortune, you want to get chicks, you want to hook up with the groupies, like this and that, like that's why you wanted to get into the business. And it like shut Maven up real fast, but like at the same time, that's the kind of stuff that like people, their eyes are such in the glitz and glam that they don't think long term of where they're going to be. They just think right here in the then and now. Like well, seems like a cool thing. Everybody watches WrestleMania every year. That's why I got into the business. Like, what?
It makes no sense, but okay. All right. The next question is, other than your dad, who did you look up to in the business growing up?
Who did what?
Who did
I look up to?
Who did you like? Like, who
Oh,
were your
man.
favorites growing up?
Like younger years, like definitely, like I said, I was born a Hulkamaniac. I've done plenty of newspaper and magazine interviews where people are talking to me, and one of my quotes that people always put in there is like, most kids grew up with a pacifier. I grew up chewing on a Hulk Hogan action figure head. Like that's the truth. Hulkamaniac, diehard Hulkamaniac, still am till this day. I was a huge Bret Hart fan. My dad wrestled all of the Harts, was very close with all the Harts. I posted a post yesterday, where he had just wished Bret a happy birthday. And, I posted a picture of my dad and him standing together, talking and hanging out. And then it was a picture of Bret with my dad in the sharpshooter. God, like Bret, Hogan. In later years, when ECW came around, I was a huge Terry Funk fan. I was a huge Rob Van Dam fan, huge Mike Awesome fan. In WCW, I was always a Surfer Sting fan back when I was a little kid. Loved Sting with the bleach blonde hair. Of course, you love all the regulars. You love the Flayers and the Macho Mans and all that other kind of stuff. I was big into like cruiserweights. I loved Billy Kidman back when he wore like a wife beater and all that other kind of stuff. And Ray and Eddie and all those guys. Benoit, nobody likes to, oh God, mention Benoit's name and everybody fucking gets politically incorrect and stuff. But regardless of what happened, in his life, I don't condone that, but regardless of what happened in his life, you can't take away the talent that the guy had in the ring.
Super talented.
And like, yep. And I mean, like, there's just so many different guys. I mean, that's all that stuff. Later in TNA years, in like 2002, I became a humongous fan of AJ Styles, which, once again, another pinch me moment. You fast forward to 2016, and I'm on pay-per-view on Backlash, standing backstage with AJ Styles face to face, and I'm like, wow, like 12-year-old Brian that used to get the pay-per-views for $9.99 on Wednesday nights, was freaking out that, in my later years now, here I am face to face with the face that runs the place, or whatever the hell he was at the time, AJ Styles, on the night that he became world champion, beat Dean Ambrose for the title on Backlash.
That is awesome. That is awesome. You mentioned chewing on a Hogan figure. Look at this. Show you something real quick. Me and my son, my youngest son, chewed on the same figure I chewed on.
Dude, that's the Thumb Wrestler.
Yeah.
That's from 84.
Yeah. 1984.
Nice.
That was my chew toy when I was a baby. Then my son, my youngest son, chewed on this when he was a baby.
I love it. So, I was, like I said, I was a huge Hulkamaniac fan.
I mean, I've had it so long.
I also
he chewed the arm almost completely off.
The tag belts behind you, man, I'm like marking out pretty hard for those right now. I think those are awesome.
The WWF tag belts?
Yeah, man.
I'll pull one down.
Those are so awesome.
These are made by LJN, or these are made by Capco, and I made them after the 90s tag titles.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, that's one of my favorite belts. Even I think my tag belts are modeled after that same exact design. I'm like, the Bulldogs, Hart Foundation, all those tag teams that held those titles. I'm like, oh God, man, Demolition, all that stuff. So
I had just ordered those when I saw the USW tag title. And it was like, me and Brian Hardy think alike.
That's that my heavyweight title came like of a half cop off design of the ECW heavyweight title that Terry Funk had. That was my tribute to Terry. And then my silver screen title, completely original design by myself and Owen Hardy. And so I'm like, that's pretty awesome. That's something that for the rest of my life, I'll be very proud of that. And then the tag belts were a little bit of a knockoff of the WWF tag belts with some excess design. And then my Lady Liberty Championship. It's a complete fresh design too. I mean, we took little tiny snips of like the Fabulous Moolah title and sort of like zone them into that. But yeah, I love the USW titles. I love the MWF titles from back in the days, and I have every single title that I've ever won out in my living room right now. So like every single championship that I've ever won in my career, I think with the exception of like 2 titles, I have every single title out in my living room right now. There's just tons and tons of belts in my living room right now.
Wow. I just got that little bit of belts back there, but I'm going to catch up.
Absolutely. It was tough, man. It took me years. It was like a dream of mine. I was like, I want to have these belts, and I took a long time to track them down. I mean, I won tag belts with my dad in Ohio and stuff like that. I had to track those down and like all this other stuff, and I was just kind of like, it's put up or shut up time. Like I want every like accolade that I've ever had in my career framed or whatever. It's really bad. I don't want to flip the camera around right now, but if I wish I was telling you a joke. It's probably the start of my next book that I write. My kids always laugh because they're like, "Damn, Dad's got a shrine to himself in this house." So I'm like, "Yeah, I've got all the stuff that I'm a fan of." But then like, there's tons of Brian Hardy tour posters and albums hanging out there on the wall, and then there is tons of the wrestling belts that I've won, and then there's like behind me here, I've got somewhere over here, I've got my PWI 500 that I was featured in back in 2012, and I got a humongous behind me on the camera. I've got a humongous, like almost as tall as me in person photo of me and Charlie Caruso on Monday Night Raw, where I've got the WWE microphone in my hand. It's like on my wall. It takes up most of my wall behind my TV. So my kids are like, "Dad, you're too much at times. Like, you're too much, man. Like this and that." It's like, I'm just proud, man. I'm proud of where I came from. Like I had probably like the most like tough childhood that someone could ever have. I mean, I talk about it in my book. I had a very, very rough childhood, and I was not a silver spoon kid by any means or anything like that or whatever. And like I worked my ass off to get to where I was as an adult. And I'm just so proud of the things that I accomplished in my life. And at times people try to downplay that stuff, like I said, and I kind of just tell them like, get fucked. Because the thing is once again, like if you've been somewhere and you've done it, cool. And you want to talk about it, fine. Like, but if you ain't never been anywhere and you're like knocking on people that have been, certain places and done certain things, I got like zero tolerance for that kind of stuff.
I don't blame you there. I don't blame you there. We have a lady by the name of Melissa Reed that's commented on this on our live now 3 times. She said, "I love it. Big Hulk Hogan fan and Andre the Giant fan." And she said, "We have a Brian Hardy wall too in the King's room."
That's awesome. That's awesome. So that is a fan from the West Virginia area down here by Maryland. And her son is like a die hard Brian Hardy fan. So I greatly appreciate you guys watching tonight. And that is so cool. I mean, I'm sure their room has to be cool because I know recently at like the last couple of shows, he's gotten a Brian Hardy headband like straight off of me. Like I do the Bret Hart deal. I take the sunglasses off and put them on the kids in the front row and stuff like that and everything. So like he's got a pair of my shades, got one of my headbands. I don't know what else he's got. I'm sure he's got Brian Hardy posters and trading cards and all that kind of stuff. So that's really cool.
That is great. That is really good. That is. Next question is there anything that you would do differently in your wrestling career?
Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. I sometimes have been better than others. I tell people 110% pro wrestling, it sucks to say. And like, I can't quote people. I can tell you that I do have siblings. And like I said, my siblings might tell you that pro wrestling ruined our lives. I can't agree with that. So for me, For them, I'm sorry, like I don't speak to my siblings, but and that's a whole nother story. Like I said, read my book. But I don't speak to my siblings, and it's one of those things where like sometimes you just got to find your zen in this world, and if people are messing with your happiness and your zen and stuff, you just got to kind of like cut ties and just do you. And I'm a big believer in that, but I also believe deep down that pro wrestling saved my family's life. Like there are times where and I get mad because I go into a lot of these independent shows, and you've worked for me, so you know how it goes and stuff like that. But I go into a lot of these independent shows, and I hear a lot of guys say like, I'll give you a prime example. I was in a locker room like not too long ago, and I heard the promoter say, nobody, like you need to do this, you need to do that. Nobody is making a living off of pro wrestling. And I just kind of like looked and I kept my mouth shut. And like I didn't say anything because I don't want to be rude and ignorant and stuff. But I'm thinking, I did, like I do, like I still do. Like family is living, breathing proof that I make a living off of professional wrestling. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be doing it. I love it with all my heart. But if at any point in time it was going to take more from me than it gave to me, I would just step away. Like, and that's the thing. Like for years, I threatened to step away, and there's been times where I've gotten discouraged about certain things in the business, and I've stepped away for, maybe a month or two. But then I literally get right back on the grind and start doing it. Like, do you know who you are? Like a buddy of mine always says all the time, I think you're the only person that doesn't know you're Brian Hardy. Like, and I'm like, yeah, but that comes with being humble though. Like that really does. Like I had to find humble bones in my body. And it's like, I think you're the only person that doesn't know you're Brian Hardy. And I'm like, yeah. So I got humble with it over the years, but at the same time, it saved my family's life. Like I said, there's stories where like I would go home. I'm talking like this is 2011, 2012. I've got a shut off notice. And if anybody is battling this in their life, I'm not saying it to put anyone down. Everybody's got struggles at different times and stuff. I'm just simply saying like I can relate because I've been there. I got a shut off notice for my electric. I have barely any food in the house. I am just figuring out how to get by for myself and my wife and my 3 little tiny babies at the time. And I get a call from WWE to come to TV. And, boom, that leads into not only a payday from WWE, but then I get these off the wall opportunities where then I get these killer photographs taken. And I'll use, like I said, this is just one of many stories. I go to WWE. I wrestle at WWE. I turn around, I make their little small guarantee that they give me to be there. I get my check in the mail. Cool, that pays 1 bill. I turn around, I get 3 other interviews at the time. I charge each interview person X amount of dollars for them to interview me. Then literally I make that money and I pay another bill. And then I literally turn around and I take the photographs that they just took of me at WWE, me holding a WWE microphone, and I go and get a ton of professional 8x10s made. And then now I grind the indies, and I literally go and I wrestle for this company for X amount of dollars and this company for X amount of dollars and this and that and yada, yada, yada. But then I tell them, okay, well, I'll come in for this or I'll come in for that. But also I want to be able to keep 100% of my merch sales and blah, 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 and whatever else. And then boom, before I know it, by the end of the night, I've got 200 8x10s of myself from WWE signed and sold. And I'm coming home with $1,900 bucks, $2,000 in my pocket at the very end of the night. And my wife's in tears crying because I have enough money now to pay the electric bill. So the electric didn't get shut off. Now I have enough money to go and put $400 or $500 in the groceries and this and that. So yeah, I take this business very seriously. Like I take it very, very seriously. I always tell people like, fuck me over, you're fucking with my livelihood. Because it's a real life job to me. It's not, I don't work a 9 to 5. I don't have a real life gig. I don't have any of that kind of stuff. It's pro wrestling or music, or if I needed a fallback plan, it would eventually be Welcome to Burger King or something like that. But as of right now, it's not that. It is, there's nothing wrong. And like I said, nothing wrong with that. I appreciate the hustle. Everybody's got different lifestyles, but yeah. I'm just saying, like, I didn't set myself up with a cushy education and go to college and go to this and that. So I knew it was rather pro wrestling and rock and roll or welcome to Burger King. There was not going to be any in the middle for me. So with that being said, though, like it put me in a real like tough spot where I had to grind, and I had to grind for years to make a living as a professional wrestler and a musician. And that's why I'm constantly putting out new posters and new albums, and why I wrote a book, and why I did this and why I did that, because that's the only way you survive in this business, is to constantly just be putting out new stuff and have new eyes on everything all the time. And that's how I made my living. And my kids say all the time, like, Dad is one of the biggest success stories that we know, because like he did it his way. The Frank Sinatra song, I did it my way, you know, like that's the truth. Like I did it my way, and I don't have any regrets, and I would never change anything the way that I did it. In my younger years, I probably would have been a little bit more polite to people. I still feel, like I said, if most people talk about me or to me, they'll always be like, God, Brian's always polite. Like, what the hell are you talking about? But I would have been a little bit more polite in my younger years. I think I am an absolute sweetheart as an older man now. Piss me off, you know, you mess with the bull, you get the horns, you know, that kind of stuff. But I don't look for a reason to have arguments with people or fight with people and stuff like that. I try to have peace and fun with everybody. So.
Awesome. Well, we've been on for over an hour now, so we're going to go into the next part of the show where I ask you about July 13th. What do we got going on July 13th?
Snap. All right. United States Wrestling, USW. United States Wrestling is mine and my wife's wrestling company, and we will be making our way to the lovely city of Elmore, West Virginia, and I am super excited. Elmore was a place years ago that I used to wrestle. I would come to town for AWA in that building, and then there would be huge sellouts in that building, and I was like, wow, like I didn't understand like how such a tiny town with such a small capacity of people could have so many people rally around professional wrestling, and I loved it. And we had gotten contacted by, you know, the people at the place that we were running a number of months back, and they were like, yeah, we'd love for you to bring pro wrestling here, and yada yada yada, and this and that. So we decided to do it. We did it back in March. We had a good time. We decided we were going to do it again. We were attempting to do it in May, and stupid me, I should have known better. I've done this once before in my life, but I booked a show for Memorial Day weekend. If there's two things I could teach you about the pro wrestling industry, is never book a show on Memorial Day weekend and never book a show on Labor Day weekend. Simple as that. It's very tough to draw. It was very tough for us to, you know, get any pre-sales for Memorial Day weekend. So I said, it's best that we cut our losses, because I had enough money. I had a whole entire budget planned out that I could have paid all the boys just fine, and it would have not been a big deal and whatever else. And we could have just ran the show, but we would have been running the show to an empty building. So instead I decided, let's postpone. The boys deserve that, to have, you know, some fans, you know, in the seats and stuff like that and whatever. So we rescheduled for July the 13th, got solid with everybody that was supposed to be on the card and all that other good stuff. And I'm excited. We have 7 matches on the card, and I'm really looking forward to it. A number of good talents. We have a lot of USW talents. We have some special RSW showcase matches as well. And I'm looking forward to a great night, like all around. I love the fans of Elmore. They're good people. I love the vibe of the whole city. And we come there, like me and my wife say, like we come just to get away from the hustle and bustle of Baltimore. So we get out of Baltimore for a little bit. We're able to go and hang out in Elmore, and it's just a nice, quiet vibe there. And it's different. The wrestling fans appreciate the wrestling. You know, they enjoy what they see and that kind of stuff. And that's what we're doing. So I'm looking forward to it. For me, my brain is kind of all over the place, because not only do I play the role of promoter and booker and this and that and all these other different things, but then also I got a big opponent, and I'm talking a big opponent. I'm talking about that big, stupid lumberjack Huck Sawyer, who took my belt from me back in March in that exact building. And I am coming back to get that championship on July 13th in the main event match.
That is awesome. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be refereeing on the card, so it's going to be a good show. I'm looking forward to the main event. Hopefully, if I'm not refereeing it, at least I'll be watching from the curtain and keeping a close eye on that one, because I had a fun watching that last one, so I can't wait to watch this one. I really enjoyed the last USW show. I was looking forward to the May, but now I'm looking forward to July 13th. We're just a few short days away, man. That's a big show. Who else is on the card? Go ahead. Tell us who's the next. Who else is on there?
Oh, dude, we got, like I said, we got some super exciting stuff right now. We have Hunter Cole versus Adam Armstrong for the USW Silver Screen Championship. They wrestled each other at the last show. Adam Armstrong defeated not only Hunter Cole, but he defeated Merrick Miami to become the Silver Screen Champion, the first ever Silver Screen Champion. So Adam Armstrong versus Hunter Cole. Will Hunter walk away with the belt this time? We have no clue. Or will Adam Armstrong retain? We don't know what's going on. There's a couple of things that I can't announce. I'm super excited, though, about the RSW Showcase Match 1 that I personally was like, heck yeah, to see. Air Duzen versus Anthony Rucker. I am super excited to see what these two guys are going to pull out against each other. Both ultra good guys. But, I mean, who knows? You know, they might be friends. We saw the promo online. They might be friends, but sometimes when you get in that ring, business is business. So I would love to see who's going to come out on top in that one.
I'm familiar with both.
I am really excited.
Both talented guys.
I'm really. I was going to say, I'm excited about that one. I'm excited about the USW tag team match. We have the Radical Stars versus Black Sunshine. Who is to say what's going to happen in that one? We don't know. Are the Radical Stars going to leave with the tag belts, or is Black Sunshine going to retain? They became the first USW tag team champions last show. I'm like, we'll just have to see where this is. We have another RSW showcase. Mount Clippus is going to be in tag team action. I'm very excited. I hear they are a great tag team in that area, and I'm super excited to see who's their opponent's going to be. We don't know yet. You will have to just come to the show, buy a ticket, and find out.
That is going to be good. That is going to be good. Mount Kilpus are talented guys. Gannon Green and Paulie Kilpus, they're great tag team. I can vouch for them. They're great guys, great wrestlers. I can't wait to see that match. Yeah, former RSW tag champions. So that's big.
We've got Robbie Wayne, USW's Robbie Wayne, who wrestled myself in the triple threat last time for the heavyweight title. It was just advertised to be me versus Robbie Wayne, and then Huck Sawyer got involved last time. Robbie Wayne was nowhere to be found at the very end. He didn't get his shot like he wanted to at the title, unfortunately. Big choke slam from Huck Sawyer to me. We've got that title rematch, but Robbie Wayne is going to be going one-on-one with the Carnival of Souls, Axel Crow. He scares me, man. He's dressed like a clown. He freaks me out.
Yeah, I don't like
what a talented individual. So
I don't like clowns.
For you, I was gonna say I'm terrified of clowns, man. He freaks me out.
Yeah,
but I'm just super excited. So we've got some other surprises in store. Sometimes, like I said, you just gotta buy a ticket because you never know what is going to happen at a USW show, and that's the best part. Sometimes stuff's advertised, sometimes it's not. But it always ends up being a great time. So if you want a fun night of family-friendly, hard-hitting pro wrestling action, you definitely want to get down to the Ellamore Volunteer Fire Department on Saturday night, July the 13th. It is going to be 6 p.m. door, 7 p.m. bell time for a great night of United States wrestling action. So I'm really excited. USW, United We Stand, Stars and Stripes. It's going to be a good time. Like I said, a nice old-school 80s throwback to pro wrestling. It's good time.
And it's always great. It's always great. Great show at USW. Melissa Reed said, we love Axel Crow. So she's a fan of Axel Crow.
Axel Crow's great, man.
So
I was going to say, Axel Crow's great. I think if I had to make a prediction at some point in time, Axel Crow's going to be a champion in USW. I don't know what title he's going to hold, but mark my words, I definitely see Axel Crow stepping up the ladder at some point in time. He is going to hold some type of championship in USW.
That is awesome. So you're saying he's the future of USW. Something to look forward to for the fans of USW to look forward to.
Definitely. And after the cameras went off last show, we had a dark main event match. After the cameras went down, it was myself and Axel Crow versus Robbie Wayne and Huck Sawyer last show. And Bob Starr got involved. Bob Starr stunned Robbie Wayne because Robbie Wayne was picking on him. Bob was like,
yeah, I remember that.
WWF and WCW wrestler. He's like, I'm not going to let you have your way with me, kid. you know. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a good night for families to get out. It's a good night for everybody, all the boys to have a really good time. And
Is Bob Starr going to be there this time?
That's pro wrestling. He will absolutely be there. I have
fans. There you go. WCW Bob Starr's going to be on the card. Come on out, see him.
Yeah, absolutely. He'll have his old WCW posters there and all that kind of stuff. I've got a huge surprise for him. I can't give it away on here, but I'm so excited.
You're going to do that one thing that you told me about, aren't you?
Yeah.
Are you going to do it at the show?
So,
you're going to do it.
We're going to actually probably. I don't know if we're doing it at the show or in the hotel lobby, but we've got two really, really big announcements for him. And one he won't find out about for a couple weeks, but this one is huge. And I think it's if I get him to cry, I'll be surprised. Let's put it that way. If I get him to cry, my respect for guys in the business.
You got to at least tape it. You got to at least tape it.
Oh yeah, it'll be aired on the USW page for sure. But it's gonna be big. And for me, it's one of those things like I've called him Uncle Bob, for years since I was a kid, and I love him. And he's such an overlooked, underrated talent all the time by people. Like the people that know who he is, and he gets his due then. But a lot of guys, it's that stigma. Oh, they've never did anything. They never did anything in the business. They were a jobber. They were this or that. Shut the hell up. You know what I mean? Like, dude's wrestled everybody. Dude wrestled Randy Savage. Dude wrestled Sting when he was the world champion. Dude wrestled everybody who's anybody. Sean, Diesel, Razor, this, that, whatever. Outsiders. Like, I mean, crap. But Bob Starr, man, like, I would take a bullet for that guy. I would jump through flaming hoops for that guy. And I've told people a million times over, if I ever ran a multi-million-dollar wrestling company, Bob Starr would be the first person that I would sign onto my roster just to be a talent agent backstage.
That is awesome, man. He was such a humble man to meet for the first time at the last USW show. He was so kind to me and everything. I really appreciate him taking time and talking to me. He didn't have to or anything like that, and he really did. So I appreciate that.
He's the best. Humble. Yes, he is the best. And for me, like I said, we stayed up till 4 a.m. When we got back from the show and everything. By the time we unloaded the ring and all that other jazz and stuff, we stayed up till 4 a.m. just sitting in the hotel lobby talking to each other and having a couple drinks and talking and everything like that. And it's like it's one of those absorbed like a sponge, man. Like he's been everywhere, he's done everything, he's seen it all. And I'm like, he's one of those guys that I'm like, I get jealous of their careers sometimes because I'm like, man, and they're like, you came in on the tail end of the business. Like you came in on the tail end of everything, like when it was good. And so you got to experience a little bit of it. And I'm like, yeah, that you guys were in the golden age of wrestling. Like you guys got to be on WCW Saturday Night and WWF Superstars and this and that and whatever. I'm like, dude, I would have killed for that. Like I got to be on SmackDown and Raw and 205 Live and main event and all that other kind of stuff, and I'm grateful for that, but it's not anywhere near the caliber of the stuff that they were doing back then. It was very revolutionary back then. So
hey, you did get to be on SmackDown and Raw and stuff like that, and that's a big thing. Like a lot of the guys around here don't get to do that, so you got to do so. You've been blessed, Brian. You really have, man.
I'm grateful. Like I said, I'm thankful for where I've been and what I've done. I'm thankful for the friendships that I've made. I'm thankful, like I said, when I look at my telephone and like just something as simple as I pull up my telephone and I scroll through my phone and see the amount of people's telephone numbers that I have in my phone. And I'm like, wow, as a kid, I never thought I would ever have any of this stuff. Like it's very eye-opening. It's very humbling at times. I try to maintain, a cool image and be cool to everybody, but at the same time I do know who I am. I do know where I came from, and I do know how hard I worked to get there. And man, love pro wrestling. Like that's the best way, honestly. I mean, if you're getting ready to close out this podcast soon, that's the best way to describe it, is that I love pro wrestling with all of my heart, and I love this business, and it has given me and my family everything that I could have ever wanted and more. So
that is awesome. That is awesome. We agree on that. We both love pro wrestling, and that's what it's about. That's what it should always be about, is the love of pro wrestling and helping one another get better, right?
Absolutely. I agree
All
with
right,
that
we're going to sign
110%.
off on that note. And Brian, you hang on. I'll come back over and talk to you, but we're going to go ahead and end the podcast. And Melissa said, and we love Brian Hardy. She said she loves you. So
awesome. Well, I greatly appreciate that. So before you sign off, everybody, at official Brian Hardy on Instagram and Facebook, at United States Wrestling or the official USW on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And be sure to check out Brian Hardy Music on all of your music streaming platforms and everything like that. Buy an album, buy a copy of my book, come talk to me at live shows. We'll have a cool conversation. Thanks, Jeremy.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for your time. Like I said, just hang on 1 second as I end this. Everybody, this has been In the Doghouse. This is episode 3 with Brian Hardy, and T-Bone's out. Y'all have a good night.